our special guest today is Rebecca Rowland. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You?
I'm well. I'm very well. Thank you.
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Rebecca, and how you got started in the horror genre.
Oh gosh. I think like most horror authors, it's just always been in my blood. I was the kid, just like every other horror writer, who just liked scary things when I was a kid.
Yeah.
At the amusement parks, right? I would like to go on the haunted house ride rather than say the Ferris wheel or the roller coaster. I was more drawn to, when I was very little, more drawn to sort of fantasy, but it was always sort of the darker part of fantasy. One of my aunts introduced me to The Hobbit and that sort of world, and I really just sort of liked, the monsters and sort of the underground aspect of and the danger of it, rather than sort of the elves and things like that. I always liked the darker parts of the stories, and I liked being scared. And so I guess I've just made a career out of it.
Yeah. So you like scaring the bejeebers out of everybody, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more of a creepy kind of writer than a scary writer. I like to have readers walk away from my stories feeling genuinely uncomfortable, which for me as an adult now, that bothers me more than being scared. Because I think with fear, it's something that's instant and very visceral, and then you kind of just get over it. Whereas if you feel uncomfortable or creeped out, it's something that you remember later on, and maybe it stays with you. And I like that feeling. So that's what I try to achieve as well.
So how do you get your ideas?
I mean, I can tell you that almost every setting that I use is a place where I've lived or visited and spent a great deal of time. So as far as locations, those are always just sort of experiences that I've had. But stories themselves, it's more of the sentences, the paragraphs, the wording that comes to me, and then the story comes second, which seems very odd. It seems like putting the cart before the horse, but I will just sort of get a sentence in my head, and I will immediately take out my phone, pull up my notepad, and just type in the sentence, and maybe a second one follows, a third one. If I'm really lucky, I'll be able to sit down and sort of write paragraph after paragraph that'll just sort of spring from that sentence. And the story just evolves from there. I think it's the story that I have more trouble with than the writing portion, which seems strange, right? Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, no, I have a writing partner, and we wrote a novel, a novella, and we have a short collection of fiction coming out in January. And he and I work very well together because he'll say, he's sort of the story man. Like, I'll have ideas, but he's very good at flushing out the story arc. Yeah. Whereas I'm more of the language person. I'm more of the writing portion. So we work really well together, but alone, I don't know. I guess I depend on the muse to just sort of tell me where it's going.
So are you kind of like seat of the pants kind of person?
It's funny. As someone that is so type A, I'm so type A, and I plan everything in life so meticulously. I want to be a plotter. I want to be a planner. But I do end up being kind of a pantser. So I guess I'm a plantser. Is that what they're calling people that are sort of somewhere in between?
I don't know. I think someone called it scaffolding as well the other day. He said that he made the word up scaffolding because he was sort of like in between the two.
I like that. I'm going to be a scaffolder. I like that. I'm stealing that.
So you sort of like try to plan things out, but then it goes the other way and then you end up doing it by the seat of your pants.
Exactly. And there are some stories that I really want it to go a certain way. Like I know that I want to use a particular, monster, for instance. There was a story that I wanted to write about a banshee, a couple of years ago. And I'm like, I'm going to write this story. And I tried to force the plot around a banshee, and I just got so stuck. And I sent it to a friend of mine, and he's so wonderful because he doesn't pull any punches. And he said, well, why do you even have a banshee in this story? And I said, I want to write about a banshee. And he said, it's not a banshee story. Take it out, put something else in there. You can do something with a ghoul. You can do something with a ghost. And he was right. If I try to sort of force that peg into the hole, it never works. I want so much to be a planner, but yeah, I definitely end up going off in a different direction most of the time.
That's funny. Okay, so what do you do with your characters? Do you plan those out, or do they just come to you from experiences and fears?
It's more experiences. I kind of feel them out. With my longer works, I really do think about them ahead of time and sort of think of who they are, what their motivations are, what their end goal is. So if I sort of have an idea of what really moves them and what draws them and what causes them to be the monsters that they are, it's sort of easier to figure out their everyday actions and their dialogue. And a lot of, I think, the characterization that I build comes through dialogue. Dialogue is one thing that does come very easily to me. And I think it's because I'm very introverted. I'm more of a listener than I am a talker. And in groups, my closest friends know, I'm the person that puts in maybe 5 words into a group conversation. And the rest of the time I'm just sort of sitting there. And it's not that I don't have something to contribute or that I'm not interested. They know it's more because I just really enjoy hearing what other people have to say about it rather than, my own whatever contribution. And so the advantage to that is that I think I've developed over the years, being an introverted kid, being an introverted young adult. And now that I'm older, I can pull dialogue right from my memory pretty easily. So I guess people that, have friends that are quiet on the quiet side, just be aware they do. They're listening. Don't think they're not listening. They're listening to what you're saying. And if they're writers, you're probably going to find your conversation in a story at some point.
Yeah, that's just natural, isn't it? As a writer.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite tropes to write about?
Oh, and wow, so that's a good question. I don't think they're my favorite. I think it's just something that I gravitate toward. I love the Twilight Zone series from the 60s, from the 80s. I love the twist at the end of stories. I love unreliable narrators. And so because I love reading that, I automatically try to craft stories, I think, that have some sort of twist, some sort of pull the rug out from you, where, you think the story is going in one direction and it completely changes gears and goes someplace else. I do that a lot. And I think as far as, themes and motifs that appear in my writing a lot, I have a lot of severely flawed characters. A lot of I've been told, and it wasn't even something that I picked up, that I have quite a few characters that drink excessively. And I don't know what that says about me. Drink excessively. They tend to have pretty filthy mouths, which I get, because when I do speak, I tend to speak like a sailor. I'm trying to be very good and sort of watch how I speak on this one. But I'm not really a monster horror writer. I'm more of a psychological or horror a psychological or quiet horror writer rather than a splatter writer, which I enjoy reading and I have written in the past, but it doesn't come natural to me. I think that quieter horror, psychological horror, cosmic horror, feminist horror is much more natural to me. And so that's sort of what I'm drawn to write about.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So what's the hardest thing about writing horror?
Oh, gosh. I don't like writing about animal death, which it's so funny. I was listening to a friend on a podcast and he was talking about how, people will complain about him killing off, a pet, but they have no trouble whatsoever, when, a child gets murdered in a story. And he's like, what kind of weird, sociopathy is going on there? And of course, I listen to it and I think to myself, I kill off children like I'm the Grim Reaper in stories. Like they're in my collection, The Horrors Hiding in Plain Sight. The editor, halfway through going through it, sort of sent me this email and said, you have a lot of child death going on in these stories. And it wasn't even something I was aware of. And it's not sort of graphic or anything like that. That's not the kind of horror that I write.
Yeah.
But he said, by like the fifth or sixth story, a kid would pop on the scene and his immediate reaction would be, well, we're not going to see much of you for, soon enough, good. Nice knowing you, kid. You're not long for this world, because most of the children, teenagers in my stories don't seem to make it to the end for whatever reason. And the irony of that is that my day job, I'm actually a public school teacher. So
that explains a lot.
Right. Right. So I guess that's self-explanatory right there, I guess. But I don't like killing off animals. And I'm not sure why that is. And it's not that I enjoyed killing off children, and certainly I don't kill them in every story, but with animals, and I even say with very young children, I think there's a degree of innocence in them that I just can't rationalize, I guess, in my head, killing them off, even to sort of scare the reader or upset the reader in some way. I think I would rather do it in other ways. So for me, it's the killing off of animals that I have trouble writing. I also am not a fan of using sexual assault in my stories. And if I have included it, it's been very sort of off stage, hinted at. It's never been graphic. It's never been in your face. And it's just because it's not something that I personally enjoy reading or like coming across in reading. And so I think that's natural for all writers. We write what we like to read. And so, not that I like to read children getting murdered. Now I'm I think I painted myself in a corner with that admission.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, kids. But I definitely do avoid things that I myself don't like to read.
You could just imagine all the parents that listen to this now, or just the one or two parents that might have to listen to this, and then it goes around the playground.
Well, I teach older children at least. So my kids are, they're 17, 18, 19 years old. And last year I was invited to a call that the book comes out actually this March. And the subject matter is evil children. So we just had to write a story that featured an evil child in some way. And I really enjoy my students a lot. I think they're the greatest. I think teenagers are hard. They're hard to work with. but I think there's so much to appreciate about them, about their enthusiasm, about their sort of sense of humor about the world that I think we lose when we get a little bit older. And so I really like them. I like working with them a lot. And so last year when I had this call, I had one class that knew I was a writer, and they, sometimes if we had downtime or if it was lunch period or something, they would ask me, well, what are you, working on now? And, or if they were writers themselves, they would sort of want to talk about what they were working on. And I had mentioned, I was just invited to this call where I have to write about, an evil child, and I'm probably going to write about teenagers. And one of my students said, you got to put me in the story. And I said, what do you want me to put you in the story? I said, you'll probably be a victim. Like, I'm going to have, this one central character, and then, sort of have her do these terrible things. And she said, no, do it. Make me a victim. I said, are you sure? Because I think it's going to be pretty disgusting, pretty awful. And she said, absolutely, make it as brutal as possible. and sure enough, she's in that story. So, and I know where she is. She's actually local. She stayed in the area, and so I plan in March when the book comes out, I'm going to bring her a copy.
Bless.
She'll appreciate it.
So what's been the most difficult scene that you've ever had to write?
Oh, gosh, what a really good question. Most difficult scene. There have been a few scenes that sort of mimicked things that I've experienced that were unpleasant. And one in particular, there's a short story in White Trash and Recycled Nightmares. And it's where I actually get the title of the collection from. It's called White Trash. And it's based very loosely on two incidences that happened when I was younger, when I was in junior high school. And they were very unpleasant, and to sort of bring them up in my memory as inspiration for this story was extremely unpleasant. It was extremely hard, and it bothered me the entire time I was writing this story. But the interesting thing is once I had the story done, there was something very cathartic and freeing about having sort of taken a memory that had plagued me, I think, for decades, and putting it into this story and almost burying it, like giving it its own funeral and service and memorial, and just being able to say, like, it's done, and now I'm done with it. And so I think when writers have difficulty writing something that's very personal, I would encourage them to push through it and do it. And even if it's a story that they never end up showing to anyone, it can be, I think, just your own sort of, I don't know, I guess this is sort of silly to say, but your own sort of therapy in a way.
Yeah.
And right, and who knows, and who knows what's going to come of it, or even, especially if it's something that it's a very personal experience, maybe it's going to help someone that does read it. I know that Evie Knight released a novella last year, 3 Days in the Pink Tower, and I'm probably getting the name wrong. It's very similar to that, but it's based on her own experience. She's very upfront in the foreword about it being based on her own experience as a teenager of being abducted by strangers and kept hostage and assaulted repeatedly over a number of days until she was able to escape. And she's now, my age. And so it's taken her decades and decades to take this story and make it into something that, reading it, you can feel the pain, every sort of stitch of pain that must have been going through her as she had to relive this, even in a fictional sense. But I think that it probably also helped quite a bit of women who have been assaulted, because it is very real, and it doesn't pull any punches, and it doesn't sugarcoat anything. And it also gives a sort of empowerment to women, especially regarding an incident where all of your power is taken from you. And so, I give her so much credit for being just so naked for everyone to be able to say, like, this happened to me. This is a horrible, horrible horror. This is a real life horror. I'm going to make it into something else, for, fictional sake. But the core of it is sort of coming from this deep, deep scar, that she carries. So, yeah. So I think that horror can do that. I think that horror can help the writer, but I think it can also help the reader, in some sense.
Yeah, a lot of authors have said that I've interviewed have said that it can be cathartic, and they do use it as therapy, writing stories about their experience. So it's not a silly thing to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell us about your books.
Oh, well, this year I was really fortunate. So I work also as an editor. So I have 7 horror anthologies under my belt, and the 7th one came out in March, and it features 20 authors taking pieces of American history and reinterpreting those pieces of history with cannibalism. And the name of the collection is American Cannibal. And the authors, I think the earliest one is the 1500s, and it goes all the way to the year 2000. Every type of horror you can imagine, from psychological and quiet to splatter, feminist, comedic. I had the best time putting together that book, and it's, it still pops up here every once in a while. I'll see it on social media, and it makes me extremely happy. I'm very, very proud to have been at the helm of that book. And in October, my collection, White Trash and Recycled Nightmares, came out, and that's 20 stories of cosmic, creature, and quiet horror. So I'm very proud of that as well. So it's been 2023 has been a great year. I've been really, really, like I said, fortunate and grateful, just grateful. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you said you've got a project that you're currently working on. Do you have any other ones?
I do. So I have a few short stories that are coming out here and there. I have a short story coming out in a collection that drops this coming Saturday. I believe you just had Christopher Rufty on your show. He's in that same anthology. It's Dark Disasters. And each of us took a natural disaster and wrapped a story around it. And I think his was a hurricane. Mine is an ice storm, which is actually, I live in the Northeast of America. And so up here we're hit with blizzards all the time. And those don't actually bother me. They're more of a nuisance than anything else, because I'm just not a fan of the cold. But ice storms are truly frightening for me, because you lose control of everything. You're just not able to stop your car. You're not able to stop yourself on walking on a hill. Often brings down power lines. Electricity will go out. And so everything is sort of literally frozen in place. And that really frightens me. So I was excited to write that story. I have a miniature collection coming out in January with my writing partner, Michael Aloisi. What Hath Women Wrought is the name of it. It's 5 stories of monstrous women, and 100% of the proceeds go to Children of the Night, which is an organization that helps trafficked individuals reintegrate into society and helps them sort of get out of the nightmare that they're in. And so it's a cause that Michael and I are both very devoted to. And so we're really happy to be able to do this charity collection. I'm currently working on my 3rd short fiction collection. It's almost done, and I hope to shop that around in the spring. And I've started doing the skeleton of a novel, but as we just talked about, I always have a plan, and who knows where it's going to go from there. So I'm working on that. But I have little pieces coming out here and there throughout the year in different anthologies that I'm really excited about.
Fantastic. I wish you all the best with those.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. So lastly, where would the listeners be able to find your books?
The best place to find everything is on my website, which is just rowlandbooks.com, ROWLAND. And there'll be links to everything. But for the most part, all of them are just about anywhere books are sold. Most of them are also on Audible if you're a fan of audiobooks. But I always encourage people, please go to your local brick and mortar bookstore and request it, because I mean, not only are you supporting brick and mortar stores, but you're letting that bookstore know that there's an interest in your book. And I think that we've become very reliant on places like Amazon and just the internet in general. And so it's just nice to be able to go into a local place and sort of find something new that you'd like to read. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for accepting my invite to come on the show. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Oh, it's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.